I first saw the red-haired woman on a night when even the coyotes had enough sense to stay quiet. Rain came down hard over Abilene, Kansas, turning the main street into a river of black mud. The wind rattled the saloon windows, pushed dust through the cracks, and made the hanging lanterns swing like they were scared of something coming. I was sitting alone in the back corner of the Silver Spur, with my hat low over my eyes and a glass of whiskey untouched in front of me. That was how I liked it. Quiet. Forgotten. A man with my past did not walk into a town looking for attention. Attention usually came with a bullet behind it. But peace never lasted long for men like me. The saloon doors flew open with a violent bang, and every head turned. She stood there in the doorway, soaked from the storm, breathing like she had outrun death itself. Her hair was the first thing I noticed. Red. Not soft red like autumn leaves, but bright and wild, like fire caught in the rain. It clung to her face and shoulders, dripping water onto a dress that had once been expensive but was now torn at the hem and stained with mud. She looked rich. She looked terrified. And she had a revolver in her shaking hand. The piano player stopped mid-note. A card dealer slowly lowered his hand. 3 drunk cattlemen near the bar stared at her like fools who had just seen a ghost wearing silk. The bartender, a fat man named Morris, lifted both hands. "Easy now, miss," he said. "No need for trouble." Her eyes moved across the room, sharp and desperate. She was searching for someone. Or hiding from someone. Maybe both. Then her gaze landed on me. I should have looked away. I should have finished my drink, stood up, and walked out the back door. Instead, I watched her walk straight toward my table. Every spur in that saloon seemed to stop jingling. She stopped in front of me, water falling from her chin. "Are you Nathaniel Crowe?" she asked. I hated hearing my name spoken out loud. Especially by strangers. "Depends who's asking," I said. "My father told me if I was ever in danger, I should find you." That made my fingers tighten around the glass. "Your father had poor judgment." Her mouth trembled, but she forced herself not to cry. I respected that. Fear was honest. Tears were not always useful. "My name is Evelyn Calloway." That name changed the room for me. Calloway. I knew it from newspapers, bank notices, railroad contracts, and rich men's conversations spoken behind closed doors. Harrington Calloway had owned land, mines, freight lines, and half the politicians in 3 territories. 2 months earlier, he had died in what the papers called a carriage accident. But rich men rarely died by accident. Not when other rich men wanted what they had. I leaned back slowly. Harrington Calloway's daughter? Her jaw hardened. His only daughter. And what does a Calloway heiress want with a man like me? She placed a leather satchel on the table. It was soaked, heavy, and strapped shut with a brass buckle. Her hand stayed on top of it like it was the only thing keeping her alive. "I need protection." A laugh came from the bar. One of the cattlemen, a broad-shouldered fool with a yellow beard, turned on his stool. "Protection? From him," he said, pointing his drink at me. "Lady, that old dog ain't done nothing but stare at whiskey all night." His friends chuckled. I did not move. Evelyn did not look at them. Her eyes stayed on mine. "They killed my driver outside town," she whispered. "They shot the horses. I ran through the creek bed. I think 2 of them followed me." The saloon went quiet again. That kind of quiet had weight. I looked past her toward the doors. Rain. Darkness. Empty street. Too empty. "How many men?" I asked. 4 at first. Maybe more now. "Names?" She shook her head. "They wore long dusters. Black kerchiefs. One had a scar from his ear to his mouth." My stomach turned cold. I knew that scar. Miles Rusk. A hired killer out of Santa Fe. Mean as barbed wire and twice as hard to get rid of. Last I heard, he had been working for railroad men who preferred graves over courtrooms. I stood up. The cattleman at the bar laughed again, softer this time. Well, would you look at that, he said. Whiskey Man found his legs. I turned my eyes on him. He stopped smiling. There are moments when a man understands that the joke he made has carried him too far from safety. That cattleman understood it quickly. I looked back at Evelyn. You have a horse. Dead. Money. Yes. That won't matter if Rusk is outside. Her face paled. You know him. I know what kind of man he is. And you should have found me sooner. Before she could answer, a gunshot cracked through the storm. The front window shattered. Glass burst inward. The piano player screamed and fell backward off his stool. Men dove under tables. Morris dropped behind the bar with a curse. Evelyn flinched, but she did not drop her revolver. That told me something important. She was afraid, but not useless. A second shot punched through the wall above my shoulder. I grabbed Evelyn by the arm and pulled her down behind the table. Stay low, I said. I can shoot. Can you hit? She hesitated. Stay low. Another shot. This one hit the lantern over the bar. Flames spilled across the wood, and Morris shouted as he slapped at it with a towel. Through the broken window, I saw movement across the street. Two shadows under the awning of the closed mercantile. One rifle. One shotgun. Bad placement. Good confidence. Men like that thought fear did half the killing for them. I pulled my Colt from its holster. The room changed when I did. Even with gunfire outside, a few men noticed. They always did. There was a particular silence that followed my hand when it found iron. I had spent years trying to bury that silence. But it still knew my name. I fired once through the broken window. The rifleman dropped hard into the mud. The shotgunner turned to run. I fired again. He spun and hit the post beside the mercantile before sliding down out of sight. 2 shots. 2 men. Nobody in the saloon breathed for a second. Then from outside came a slow clap. 1 clap. Then another. Then another. A figure stepped into the muddy street, rain running off the brim of his hat. Tall. Lean. Black duster. Even through the storm, I saw the scar cutting across his face. Miles Rusk smiled at me from beneath the yellow glow of the saloon lamps. Well now, he called. I wondered if the stories were true. I kept my Colt low, angled toward the floor. Rusk raised both hands, but not in surrender. More like a preacher greeting a congregation. Nathaniel Crow, he shouted. The fastest gun in the West, hiding in a cheap saloon like a whipped dog. Behind me, Evelyn sucked in a breath. So she had heard the stories too. That was unfortunate. Stories made people expect things from you. Rusk took 1 step closer. I don't want you tonight, Crow. Hand over the girl and the satchel, and you can crawl back into whatever bottle you came from. Evelyn's hand clutched my coat. I looked down at her. For the first time since she entered, I saw something beyond fear in her eyes. Hope. That was dangerous. Hope made people heavy to carry. I looked back at Rusk. What's in the satchel? I asked. He smiled wider. Nothing worth dying over. That means it is. Rusk's smile faded. The rain beat against the roof. Somewhere in the saloon, a man prayed under his breath. Rusk lowered his hands slowly. You always were proud, he said. But pride slows a man down eventually. So does talking. His right hand twitched near his holster. Mine did not. That bothered him. I could see it in his face. Men who lived by speed hated stillness. Stillness made them wonder. Wonder made them late. Rusk did not draw. Not yet. Instead, he stepped back into the rain. You have until sunrise, he called. After that, every road out of Abilene belongs to us. Then he disappeared into the storm. For a long moment, nobody moved. I holstered my Colt. Evelyn stood slowly beside me, still gripping the satchel. "Will he come back?" she asked. "Yes." "When?" I looked toward the broken window, where rain blew across the floor and mixed with the blood-dark mud. "Before sunrise, if he's smart." "And if he's not?" I picked up my hat from the table and placed it on my head. "Then he'll bring more men." Her voice lowered. "Mr. Crow, will you help me?" I should have said no. A smart man would have. I had no business protecting heiresses. No business fighting railroad killers. No business opening old doors that men had paid blood to keep shut. But then I looked at Evelyn Calloway, standing there soaked and shaking, carrying whatever truth had gotten her father killed. And I remembered another storm. Another woman. Another night when I had been too late. I took the satchel from her hand. "It's Nathaniel," I said. "And from now on, you do exactly what I tell you." She nodded. Outside, thunder rolled over Abilene like cannon fire. I walked toward the back door, knowing my quiet life had ended the moment that red-haired woman stepped through the rain. And somewhere in the dark, Miles Rusk was already gathering men to prove whether the fastest gun in the West could still bleed. We left Abilene before dawn. Not because I trusted the darkness, but because I trusted daylight even less. Daylight made men confident. It gave bounty hunters long sightlines and easier shots. In darkness, at least everybody feared what they could not see. The rain had weakened into a cold drizzle by the time Evelyn and I slipped through the alley behind the Silver Spur. The town was quiet except for distant thunder and the creaking signs swinging above empty storefronts. Morris had given us 2 horses from his stable after I promised him Rusk would burn the place down if he refused. Truth was, Rusk might burn it anyway. Evelyn rode beside me wearing a dark riding coat I had borrowed from the saloon owner's wife. Her bright red hair was hidden beneath a weathered hat now, though strands still escaped into the wind. She looked less like an heiress and more like someone learning how quickly the frontier could eat people alive. I kept my Winchester resting across my saddle. My Colt stayed low on my hip. Ready. Always ready. "You think they're following already?" Evelyn asked quietly. "They never stopped." She looked behind us instinctively. That told me she still believed danger announced itself loudly. Most people did until the first bullet passed their ear. Danger usually arrived silent. We rode south along a narrow trail running beside the river. Mud splashed beneath the horses' hooves while fog drifted low across the plains. For nearly an hour neither of us spoke. I preferred it that way. But silence has a strange effect on frightened people. Eventually they try filling it with questions. "You really killed those men that fast?" she finally asked. I kept my eyes ahead. "Yes. You didn't even aim. You don't aim in a gunfight. You survive it." That answer seemed to bother her. Good. People who romanticized guns usually ended up buried by them. A flock of blackbirds suddenly exploded from a cluster of trees ahead. My hand instantly moved toward the Winchester. Evelyn noticed. "What is it?" "Quiet." The horses slowed. The morning air felt wrong. Still. No insects. No birds. No wind. I slid off my saddle carefully. "Stay behind me," I whispered. She obeyed this time without argument. That was progress. I stepped through the wet grass toward the trees, boots sinking into the mud. The smell hit me before the sight did. Blood. Fresh. Under the trees lay a dead man face down in the dirt. Young. Maybe 20. Brown coat. Cheap revolver. Horse thief by the look of him. 3 bullet holes in his back. Execution style. Evelyn covered her mouth when she saw him. "Oh God." I crouched beside the body. Still warm. Not dead long. There was something pinned beneath his hand. A silver railroad token. I picked it up slowly. Evelyn frowned. "What is that?" "Payment." "For what?" "For hunting us." Her face drained of color. I turned the token over in my fingers. The engraving belonged to Blackstone Rail Company. one of the biggest railroad operations west of the Mississippi. I already disliked where this trail was leading. I stood again. We keep moving. You're just leaving him there? Yes. He was murdered. He also came to murder us. That doesn't mean. Miss Calloway. My voice cut sharper than I intended. She stopped talking immediately. I sighed and adjusted the Winchester. You want to survive this? I asked quietly. Yes. Then learn something now. Out here, the dead don't get long funerals. Her eyes hardened with anger, but beneath it I saw understanding beginning to grow. That was the frontier's cruelest lesson. Compassion cost time. Time got people killed. We rode for another 2 hours before the sun finally broke through the clouds. Golden light stretched across the plains, illuminating miles of empty grassland and distant hills. Beautiful country. Deadly country. Evelyn kept glancing toward me like she wanted to ask another question. Eventually she did. How did you become that? The fastest gun in the West. I almost laughed. People said those words like they were describing a hero. There were no heroes in Gunsmoke. By living longer than the other men, I answered. That's all. That's enough. She studied me carefully. You don't like talking about yourself. Do you? No. Then we understand each other. That earned the smallest smile from her. First one I'd seen. It surprised me more than it should have. Around noon we stopped near a rocky ridge to water the horses. I scanned the horizon while Evelyn knelt beside the creek filling a canteen. That was when I noticed the tracks. 3 riders. Fresh. Coming fast. I moved immediately. Get down. She turned sharply. What? Now. The sound reached us seconds later. Hooves. Hard and fast. Riders coming over the ridge. I grabbed Evelyn by the arm and pulled her behind the rocks just as 3 gunmen appeared on horseback above us. One pointed down instantly. There. Gunfire exploded across the ridge. Stone shattered beside my face. I fired the Winchester once. The lead rider flew backward out of the saddle. The other 2 split apart immediately, experienced enough not to ride side by side under rifle fire. Good. Professionals. I hated professionals. Stay low. I shouted at Evelyn. Bullets sparked against rock around us. One rider circled left trying to flank our position while the other stayed high, firing downward to pin us. Smart tactic. Too smart for ordinary bounty hunters. I worked the Winchester lever smoothly and fired again. Missed. The rider ducked behind his horse's neck. The flanker suddenly appeared closer than expected. Fast bastard. He fired twice. One bullet tore through my coat sleeve. The second nearly took my ear off. Evelyn screamed. Then another gunshot cracked beside me. Her revolver. The flanking rider jerked sideways in the saddle, shocked more than hurt. Her bullet hit his shoulder. Not fatal, but enough. I stood and fired instantly. My round caught him square in the chest. He dropped hard into the dirt. The last rider cursed and turned his horse uphill, trying to escape. I did not let men like that escape. One final Winchester shot echoed across the plains. The rider slid lifeless from the saddle before reaching the ridge. Silence returned. Only the horses breathed now. Evelyn stared at the revolver in her trembling hand. I hit him, she whispered. Yes. I actually hit him. You also almost hit me. Her eyes widened. I'm sorry. But you bought me enough time. I reloaded calmly while scanning the horizon again. No more riders. Not yet. Evelyn slowly lowered the revolver. I've never shot anyone before. Neither had they once. That answer haunted her immediately. I saw it. Good again. Fear kept people cautious. I walked toward the dead riders and searched their bodies quickly. Railroad tokens. All 3. One carried a folded paper inside his coat. I opened it carefully. Evelyn stepped beside me. "What is it?" I stared at the page for several seconds before answering. It wasn't a wanted poster. It was a photograph. Old and faded. A picture of Evelyn standing beside an older man I recognized from newspapers, Harrington Calloway. On the back was written a single sentence. "Confirm the girl is dead." Evelyn went pale. "Oh my God." I folded the paper slowly. "This isn't about kidnapping," I said quietly. Her breathing quickened. "Then what is it about?" "Extermination." The wind moved softly through the grass around us. Far away, thunder rumbled again beyond the hills. Evelyn looked at me with genuine fear now. Not the fear of gunmen. Not the fear of death. The deeper fear. The kind that comes when you realize powerful people have decided you should no longer exist. "Who would do this?" she whispered. I looked toward the endless western horizon. Toward railroad tracks cutting across America like steel veins. Toward the rich men building empires with money, oil, land, and blood. Then I remembered the token in my pocket. Blackstone Rail Company. And suddenly I knew this story was bigger than one frightened heiress carrying secrets in a leather satchel. Much bigger. I mounted my horse again. "We're changing routes," I said. "To where?" "There's an old marshal in New Mexico owes me a favor." "You trust him?" "No." "Then why go?" I looked at her seriously. "Because the men hunting you are connected to people powerful enough to buy sheriffs, judges, and governors." She swallowed hard. "And this marshal? He's one of the few men I know who hasn't sold his soul yet." We started riding again beneath the darkening sky. But this time Evelyn stayed much closer beside me. And for the first time in years, I felt something dangerous returning inside me. Not fear. Not anger. Purpose. The kind that had once made men across the frontier whisper my name with shaking hands. Behind us, 3 bodies rotted slowly beneath the western sun. Ahead of us waited New Mexico. And whatever terrible truth Harrington Calloway had died trying to protect. By the 3rd day, the land itself started looking hostile. Kansas had given way to harsher country. Dry hills, crooked trees, and endless stretches of desert grass that seemed to hide danger beneath every shadow. The sky hung low and gray over New Mexico territory, heavy with dust instead of rain. Evelyn rode beside me quietly now. The frightened heiress from Abilene was disappearing little by little. The frontier had begun hardening her around the edges. That was survival. Out here, softness got stripped away fast. We stopped near dusk on a ridge overlooking a small town tucked between rocky hills and dead-looking cottonwoods. Dust water. At least that was what the faded wooden sign claimed. Evelyn studied the town below. "This is where your marshal friend lives." "Used to." That doesn't sound reassuring. It isn't. The town looked half asleep beneath the orange evening light. Smoke drifted from chimneys. Horses stood tied outside buildings with peeling paint. A church bell rang once in the distance. Normal. Too normal. I hated towns that looked too calm. Usually meant fear lived there already. As we rode down the hill, people noticed us immediately. A pair of men playing cards outside the barber shop stopped talking. A woman carrying groceries hurried across the street with her head lowered. Even the stable boy avoided eye contact when I handed him the reins. That told me enough. Dustwater was scared of something. Or someone. Evelyn noticed it too. "Why are they looking at us like that?" "Because strangers bring trouble." "And we do." "Yes." We walked toward the saloon at the center of town, boots crunching over dry dirt. The place was called the Iron Lantern, though only one lantern still hung outside. Inside smelled of whiskey, smoke, sweat, and old wood. The conversations died the moment I stepped through the door. That happened more often than I liked. Evelyn moved closer beside me. A piano played softly in the corner, though the musician suddenly seemed far less interested in finishing the song. I scanned the room slowly. 3 miners. 2 ranchers. A drunk asleep near the stairs. And at the far end of the bar sat a broad old man with grey hair and a thick beard, cleaning a revolver with slow, deliberate movements. Marshal Elias Boone. Older than I remembered. Meaner too. He looked up once, saw me, and froze. "Well," he muttered. Hell finally froze over. I walked to the bar. "You look terrible, Boone." "So do you." His eyes shifted toward Evelyn. "That her?" "Yes. She looks expensive. She's listening. That means she already knows how ugly the world is." Evelyn pulled off her gloves slowly. "You're the marshal?" "Unfortunately." Boone holstered the revolver and poured himself whiskey. Then he poured another glass and slid it toward me. I stared at it for a second. Hadn't touched whiskey since Abilene. Didn't plan to start leaning on old habits again. But Boone noticed my hesitation instantly. "You still fighting ghosts, Crow?" "Ghosts don't drink." "No," he said quietly. "But men trying to forget usually do." I ignored that. Evelyn sat beside me carefully. "We need a safe place," she said. Boone barked out a humorless laugh. "Then you came to the wrong town. That got my attention." "What happened here?" Boone's expression darkened. "Railroad happened." "Of course it did." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. 3 months ago, Blackstone Rail Company bought land outside town. Claimed they were expanding west. And now people disappear. The saloon had become very quiet around us. Too quiet. Boone noticed me noticing. "Told you," he muttered. "Town's scared." Evelyn frowned. "You think Blackstone is behind the men chasing me?" Boone looked at her like the answer was obvious. "Miss, Blackstone's behind half the bloodshed west of Denver." My jaw tightened. "How deep?" "Deep enough that judges look away and sheriffs suddenly get rich." That matched what I already feared. But Boone still hadn't answered the question that mattered. Why kill Harrington Calloway? At that, Boone stopped moving entirely. His eyes shifted toward Evelyn. Then toward the saloon windows. Then back to me. "You really don't know?" "No." "That means the girl hasn't opened the satchel yet." Evelyn stiffened instantly. "You know what's inside?" "No," Boone said carefully. "But I know why men are dying for it." I leaned closer. "Talk." Boone drained his whiskey first. Then he spoke quietly enough that only we could hear. 2 months ago, Calloway discovered Blackstone was buying entire towns before laying tracks through them. "That's normal business." "No," Boone growled. "Not when the people living there refuse to sell." Cold settled in my stomach. Evelyn's face paled. Boone continued. "They'd send men in first. Burn ranches, poison wells. Start fights. Kill a few people. Make life miserable until families abandoned everything." "Jesus." "They were stealing land," Evelyn whispered. Boone nodded. "And your father found proof." Evelyn's hand slowly moved toward the satchel beside her chair. "No." "He was preparing to expose them publicly," Boone said. Then suddenly his carriage rolled off a cliff. I looked toward the dusty saloon windows. Murder disguised as an accident. Rich men loved clean-looking violence. Evelyn's voice trembled slightly. "My father told everyone he trusted Blackstone." "Publicly," Boone answered. "Privately. Different story." For several seconds none of us spoke. The piano resumed quietly in the background. A glass shattered somewhere near the stairs. Normal saloon sounds. But tension sat heavy in the air now. Because we all understood the same thing. If Blackstone killed Harrington Calloway for learning the truth, they would absolutely kill his daughter for carrying evidence. Boone leaned closer again. "You need to leave tonight." "We just got here," Evelyn protested. "That's exactly why you need to leave." I studied Boone carefully. You expecting company? His eyes shifted toward the window again. Then I heard it. Horses. Several of them. Outside. The entire saloon seemed to hear them at once. Conversations stopped. The piano died again. Boone cursed under his breath. They're early. I stood slowly. How many? Too many. Evelyn gripped the satchel tightly. The saloon doors opened. 6 men entered. Black dusters. Armed. Professional. And standing in the middle of them was Miles Rusk. Rainwater no longer covered him, but he somehow looked even uglier beneath proper light. The scar across his face twisted when he smiled. Nathaniel Crowe, he said warmly. You keep making this difficult. Nobody in the saloon moved. Nobody breathed. Rusk's eyes shifted toward Evelyn. There she is. My hand rested near my Colt. Rusk noticed immediately. So that's how tonight goes, he asked casually. You came armed. I came prepared. One of his men locked the saloon doors behind them. Another pulled the curtains shut. The townspeople lowered their eyes. Fear again. Dustwater had seen these men before. Boone stood slowly beside me. You boys got business with my town? Rusk barely looked at him. You're old, Marshall. Sit down before somebody buries you with dignity. Boone smiled faintly. Last man said that lost 3 teeth. A few nervous chuckles escaped around the room before dying quickly. Rusk sighed dramatically. I was hoping for cooperation. Then his expression vanished completely. Cold. Empty. Killing everybody is tiring. Every instinct in my body tightened. This was no bluff. Miles Rusk would absolutely slaughter every soul in the saloon if he thought it necessary. Evelyn whispered beside me. Nathaniel. I heard the fear in her voice again. But now there was something else mixed into it. Trust. That was worse. Trust made people depend on you. And people who depended on me usually got hurt. Rusk slowly removed his gloves. You know, he said calmly, Blackstone offered me $5,000 for the girl. Nobody spoke. But then they doubled it, he continued. After you started protecting her. His eyes locked onto mine. Seems your reputation still scares important people. I finally answered. Good. Rusk smiled. Then his hand moved. Fast. But not fast enough. The saloon exploded into gunfire. Women screamed. Glass shattered. Tables flipped over as bullets tore through wood and smoke filled the room. I drew my Colt. And the fastest gun in the West came alive again. The first man died before most people in the saloon even understood the shooting had started. Rusk's gun cleared leather fast. Mine cleared faster. The sound of my Colt thundered through the iron lantern, and the gunman beside the door collapsed backward into the window, glass exploding across the street outside. Then chaos swallowed everything. Men screamed. Tables overturned. Whiskey bottles shattered behind the bar. Gun smoke rolled thick through the lantern light while bullets ripped through wood like angry hornets. Down! I shouted at Evelyn. She dropped behind the bar beside Boone just as 2 more shots blasted over her head. I fired again. Another of Rusk's men spun sideways and crashed into a poker table. The entire room smelled of burnt powder now. Rusk dove behind a support beam near the stairs, firing blindly toward me. 1 bullet tore through my coat near the ribs. Close. Too close. Boone grabbed a shotgun from beneath the counter and unleashed both barrels toward the center of the saloon. The blast nearly split the room in half. 1 outlaw flew backward over a chair while another screamed, clutching his bleeding leg. Still got all my teeth. Boone roared. Even during gunfights, that old bastard found time for jokes. I moved left fast, staying low while bullets hammered the wall behind me. Years ago, men said I looked calm in gunfights. Truth was, calm had nothing to do with it. A gunfight stripped the world down to instincts. Movement. Noise. Timing. Survival. Nothing else existed. One of the outlaws overturned a table and crouched behind it near the piano. Bad position. The mirror behind the bar showed me his boots. I fired once into the reflection. The outlaw screamed and dropped. Never hide behind something when a mirror gives your position away. Rusk knew that trick too. That was why he suddenly vanished from sight entirely. Smart. Dangerous men disappeared during gunfights. Fools stayed visible. Evelyn fired from behind the bar. Her shot shattered a lantern instead of hitting a man, plunging half the room into flickering darkness. But it forced the outlaws back for a second. That mattered. Boone reloaded his shotgun beside her. "You shoot like a rich woman," he barked. "I am a rich woman. Then buy better aim." Despite everything, I nearly smiled. Then I heard footsteps above us. Stairs. I looked up instantly. Rusk. He had circled onto the second-floor balcony overlooking the saloon. Damn him. He leaned over the railing with a rifle already aimed downward. Crow. I barely dove aside before the rifle blasted splinters from the floorboards where my head had been. The entire second floor shook. "He's above us," I shouted. Too late. Another shot rang out. This one hit Boone. The old marshal staggered backward into the shelves behind the bar, whiskey bottles crashing around him. "Boone, I ain't dead," he growled through clenched teeth. Blood spread dark across his shoulder. Rusk worked the rifle lever slowly upstairs. Patient. Enjoying himself. That was the problem with killers like him. They loved the work. "Throw down your guns," Rusk shouted from above. "Last chance before I burn this whole town." Outside, more horses approached. Reinforcements. I cursed under my breath. Evelyn saw my expression immediately. "There's more." "Yes." "How many?" "Enough." Fear crossed her face again. Not panic. Realization. She was beginning to understand that this wasn't temporary anymore. There would be no safe return to her old life after this. No fancy parties. No comfortable mansions. No protection from family wealth. Only survival. I grabbed Boone's arm. "Can you move? Can still shoot?" That wasn't the question. The old marshal grunted and forced himself upright despite the blood loss. "Back exit," he muttered. "Stable alley." I nodded. Good. At least we had a path. But Rusk still owned the balcony above us. And if we tried running now, he would cut us apart before we reached the street. Evelyn suddenly touched my arm. "Nathaniel." "What?" She pointed toward the piano. At first I didn't understand. Then I saw it. The old upright piano sat directly beneath the balcony supports. An idea formed instantly. Dangerous. But possible. I looked at her carefully. "You trust me?" Her eyes locked onto mine. "Yes." That word hit harder than expected. I pushed the feeling aside. "No room for that now." "When I move," I said quietly, "you and Boone run for the kitchen door. What about you?" "I'll catch up." That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be. Rusk fired again from above. Wood exploded beside us. "Time's running out, Crow." I ignored him. Then I moved. Fast. I sprinted through the smoke toward the piano while gunfire erupted instantly around me. Bullets smashed bottles and shattered tables as I slid behind the instrument. Rusk shouted from above. "There you are." The rifle aimed downward. Exactly where I wanted it. I kicked hard against the side of the piano. The heavy instrument tipped slowly at first, then crashed sideways into the balcony support beam. The entire second floor groaned violently. Rusk's expression changed instantly. The balcony cracked beneath him. Wood splintered. Then half the structure collapsed. Rusk and two of his remaining men crashed into the saloon below in a storm of broken timber and dust. The room erupted with screams. Now! I roared. Evelyn and Boone ran toward the kitchen immediately. I drew my Colt again as Rusk struggled through the wreckage, bleeding from the forehead but still alive. Always hard to kill bastards like him. He grabbed a revolver from the floor and fired wildly through the smoke. One bullet struck my left arm. Pain exploded through me like fire. My Colt nearly slipped from my fingers. Rusk saw it. And smiled. There he is, he hissed. The old legend finally bleeding. He stood slowly among the broken boards. Blood ran down his scarred face now, making him look almost demonic beneath the flickering lantern light. Outside, horses screeched to a halt. More men were arriving. We were running out of seconds. Rusk raised his revolver toward me carefully this time. No rushing. No ego. Just murder. You should have stayed forgotten, Crow. My wounded arm burned badly. My breathing slowed. Everything around me seemed quieter suddenly. That old feeling returned. The one before every deadly duel. The stillness. Rusk fired. So did I. 2 shots cracked together. For one endless second neither of us moved. Then Rusk looked down slowly. Blood spread across his stomach. His revolver slipped from his hand. He staggered backward against the broken remains of the balcony, staring at me with disbelief. You, he whispered. I walked closer carefully, Colt still raised. Rusk coughed blood onto the floorboards. You really are, he muttered weakly. Then he collapsed. Dead. The saloon fell silent except for distant shouting outside. But there was no relief in me. Men like Rusk were never the top of the mountain. Only the wolves beneath it. Which meant worse men still waited ahead. I grabbed extra ammunition from a dead outlaw and hurried through the kitchen door into the alley behind the saloon. Boone leaned weakly against the wall near the horses while Evelyn held his shoulder closed with a torn piece of cloth. The moment she saw blood on my arm, her face tightened. You're hit. So are half the men inside. That's not funny. No, I admitted. It isn't. Gunfire echoed from the front of town now. More riders. More Blackstone men. Boone grimaced through pain. You need to ride. Now. You're coming, Evelyn said immediately. Boone laughed weakly. Girl, I can barely stand. You helped us. Exactly why they'll kill me. I stepped toward him. You still got fight left. Enough for one last bad decision. That sounded like Boone. I handed him a revolver from one of the dead outlaws. Then make it count. The old marshal checked the weapon calmly. Then he looked at me with tired eyes. You know what's waiting if you keep digging into this? Yes. And I mounted my horse slowly despite the pain in my arm. Then I looked toward the dark western horizon beyond Dustwater. Toward railroad empires. Corrupt businessmen. Paid killers. And whatever secrets still hid inside Evelyn's satchel. I buried who I used to be a long time ago, I said quietly. Boone nodded once. But they keep forcing him back out. Behind us, flames began spreading through the iron lantern. Dustwater glowed orange beneath the night sky as Blackstone's riders stormed the streets searching for us. Evelyn climbed onto her horse beside me, clutching the satchel tightly against her chest. Nathaniel, she whispered. Where do we go now? I looked south toward the mountains. Toward the place Harrington Calloway's secrets were leading us. And toward the men powerful enough to kill entire towns to protect them. Straight into hell, I answered. Then we rode into the darkness while Dustwater burned behind us. We rode through the night without stopping. Dustwater burned behind us like a dying star on the horizon, its orange glow slowly disappearing beneath the black New Mexico sky. Cold wind whipped across the desert, carrying smoke, sand, and the distant echoes of gunfire. Evelyn stayed close beside me. Closer than before. Not because she trusted the wilderness. Because she no longer trusted the world. My left arm throbbed from the bullet wound every time the horse shifted beneath me. I had wrapped it tightly with torn cloth before leaving town, but blood still soaked through slowly. Evelyn noticed. "You need a doctor. I need distance. You could lose the arm. I've lost worse." That answer quieted her. For a while, only hoofbeats filled the darkness. Then finally she spoke again. "What happens if they never stop hunting us?" I looked ahead toward the mountains rising against the moonlight. "They won't." Her face tightened. "You say that very calmly. I've been hunted before. But not like this. No. Not like this." Ordinary bounty hunters chased money. Blackstone Rail Company was chasing silence. And men protecting secrets were always more dangerous than men protecting gold. Near dawn we reached an abandoned mining settlement hidden between rocky cliffs. Half the buildings had collapsed years earlier, and the rest leaned sideways like exhausted old men waiting to die. Perfect place to disappear for a few hours. I helped Evelyn down from her horse, though my injured arm nearly gave out doing it. "You're pale," she said. "I'm charming." Different thing. That joke was terrible. Means I'm still alive. For the first time since Dustwater, she smiled again. Small. Tired. But real. Strange how much warmth one smile could bring into a cold place. I hated noticing that. Feelings complicated survival. Always had. Inside one of the abandoned cabins, I barred the door while Evelyn lit an old oil lamp we found on a shelf. Dust drifted through the golden light as wind rattled the broken windows. She opened the satchel carefully for the first time. Even now, after all the blood spilled over it, I realized I had never actually seen what was inside. Documents. Maps. Letters. Railroad contracts. And beneath them all, a leather journal. Evelyn picked it up slowly. "My father's handwriting," she whispered. She opened the first pages carefully while I kept watch near the window. Minutes passed in silence except for the turning of paper. Then her breathing changed. Sharp. Uneasy. "What is it?" I asked. She looked up at me with pale eyes. "It's worse than we thought. That took effort. We already had murder, land theft, and hired killers. How much worse?" She swallowed hard. My father discovered Blackstone wasn't just stealing land for railroads. "Then what?" She handed me one of the papers. A map. Red circles marked several small frontier towns across New Mexico, Arizona, and Colorado. Every one sat directly above underground water reserves or silver deposits. I frowned. "Mining." "Yes," she whispered. Blackstone used railroad expansion as cover to seize valuable land before anyone realized what was underneath. That explained the violence. Control the land first. Then become rich enough to own entire territories. But something still bothered me. This alone wouldn't require armies of killers. "No," Evelyn said quietly. "It gets worse." She handed me another document. My stomach turned cold as I read it. Government signatures. Military supply contracts. Names of senators. Judges. Even governors. Blackstone had bribed officials across multiple territories. The railroad company wasn't just powerful. It was protected. "That's why nobody stopped them," Evelyn whispered. My father was gathering evidence to expose all of them together. I leaned against the wall slowly. Jesus Christ. This wasn't a land dispute anymore. This was corruption reaching into the highest levels of Western expansion. And if Blackstone completed their railroad monopoly with control over mining routes and water access, they could practically own the frontier. Evelyn closed the journal carefully. "There's one more thing." Her voice had changed. Fear again. Deep fear. She handed me the final page. I read it once. Then again. Because I wanted to be sure. Harrington Calloway had written a list of names shortly before his death. Men involved with Blackstone. Politicians. Businessmen. Enforcers. And one name near the bottom stopped my breathing entirely. Nathaniel Crow. Evelyn saw my expression instantly. What is it? I stared at the page. Then took the journal closer to the lamp. No mistake. My name. Written clearly. You knew my father, she whispered. I said nothing. Nathaniel. I sat down slowly in the chair beside the window. Memories returned hard and fast. Texas. Years ago. A train robbery gone wrong. 3 dead men. One rich businessman who paid me afterward to escort freight through outlaw territory. Harrington Calloway. I had not seen him in nearly 8 years. He hired me once, I admitted quietly. Evelyn stared at me. For what? Protection. From who? Same kind of men hunting us now. Silence filled the cabin. Then she asked the question I already knew was coming. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know this was connected. But my father trusted you. I looked down at the journal again. Maybe he had. That thought sat heavily in my chest. Evelyn moved closer slowly. He wrote something else. What? She pointed lower on the page. A final sentence beneath the names. If anything happens to me, only Nathaniel Crow can get Evelyn to Silver Creek alive. I stared at the words without speaking. Silver Creek. Of course. The old mining settlement deep in the mountains near the Arizona border. Hidden. Remote. Almost impossible to reach quickly. What is Silver Creek? Evelyn asked. A dead town. Then why send us there? Because dead towns are hard to find. Before she could answer, movement flashed outside the cabin window. Horse riders. At least 6. Coming through the canyon. Fast. I extinguished the lamp instantly. Get down. Evelyn obeyed immediately. We crouched in darkness as distant voices echoed through the abandoned settlement. They're here somewhere. Blackstone riders. Already. Damn. Too fast. That meant one thing. Somebody from Dustwater survived long enough to tell them where we were heading. I checked my revolver. 5 rounds left. My Winchester leaned beside the wall. Evelyn whispered beside me. What do we do? I listened carefully to the riders outside. They were spreading out. Searching building by building. Professional sweep. No panic. No wasted movement. Which meant whoever led them knew exactly what they were doing. Then a voice outside froze my blood cold. Crow. Not Rusk. Older. Deeper. A voice I recognized from long ago. I slowly looked through the crack in the window. And there he was. Black coat. Gray mustache. Cold eyes. Colonel Victor Hale. Former cavalry officer. Now head of Blackstone Security. One of the deadliest men I had ever met. Evelyn saw my expression. You know him? Yes. Is he dangerous? No. She looked confused. Then I finished. He's worse. Outside, Hale dismounted calmly. Unlike Rusk, there was no swagger in him. No ego. Just discipline. That made him terrifying. Nathaniel, he called again. You were always hard to kill. I stayed silent. Hale smiled faintly in the moonlight. You know how this ends. Hand over the girl. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the journal. I looked at her. Then at the riders surrounding the canyon. No clean escape. No good odds. And my arm was weakening from blood loss. Hale continued speaking calmly outside. You're not protecting her anymore, Crow. You're threatening the future of the American West. That line almost made me laugh. Men building empires always dressed greed in patriotic language. Railroads. Progress. Civilization. But underneath it all was the same old thing. Power. Hale stepped closer toward the cabin. We can still make a deal. No, I answered finally. The canyon became silent. Hale's smile disappeared. You should have stayed retired. I checked my Colt one final time. You should have stayed in the army. Then everything exploded at once. Gunfire ripped through the cabin walls. Wood splintered around us as bullets tore through the darkness. I grabbed Evelyn and pulled her behind the overturned table while rifle shots blasted holes through the windows. Outside, Hale's men spread through the settlement like wolves. The final battle had begun. And somewhere beyond those mountains waited Silver Creek, along with the truth powerful enough to shake the entire frontier.